While the New York Mets were unable to complete their comeback in the final game of the first half, the comeback of Sean Manaea was far more important.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. I've covered the New York Mets on this show since the 2019 season. It's the only podcast that covers the Mets 7 days a week throughout the regular season. If you want to find some of my written work, you do so over at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Well, the first half has come to a close for the New York Mets, and they end up losing the last game of the first half of the season. Close one where the bats just showed up a little bit too late. We'll talk a little bit more about the offense in the next segment because early on it was a struggle. I think a large part of that was due to a great start by Noah Cameron, the Royals' left-handed rookie. But I really want to talk about the Mets pitching in this game. Obviously, Clay Holmes got the start. Did a nice job, 5 innings, allowed 2 runs on 5 hits, 1 walk, struck out 2. Those runs came in the second inning as Maikel Garcia had a leadoff double. Salvador Perez got hit by a pitch. Both runners advanced on the ground out, and then another double allowed, scored the 2 runs. Manaea again goes through those 5 innings, allowing just that. Finishes the first half with a 3.31 ERA in 19 starts, 103 1/3 innings pitched. I don't think you could have asked for much more out of Clay Holmes. If this was the final line for Clay Holmes this season, I would have signed up for it, to be completely honest with you. A sub-3.5 ERA and over 100 innings pitched for a guy that is making, $13 million this season? That is incredible value. But the guy that the Mets spent the most money on this offseason when it came to their starting rotation is Sean Manaea, bringing back their ace from last season. And what we saw today as Manaea entered in the 6th inning is Sean Manaea looked like that ace from last season. I think that is the biggest silver lining you could take away from a loss. Honestly, sure, you lose the game, but to get Manaea back looking like that can be everything to the New York Mets in the next half. Seeing Manaea pitch that well, and we'll see if he does that over his next few outings before the deadline, it can literally change your deadline strategy because you don't need an ace necessarily. I mean, in this series, you saw Kodai Senga look like the guy that was pitching to a 1.47 ERA before that start. I think he's got it now at like 1.38 or something crazy. And Manaea pitching the way he just did, that right there is game 1, game 2 of a playoff series. Those are your starters. And David Peterson's an all-star this year. Certainly looks like he can be a number 3. So now instead of being like, all right, you got to go get a guy that can start game 1, maybe you need to get a guy that can start game 4. Then again, Frankie Montas pitched well in this series as well. So now finally the Mets have the rotation that they wanted to come into the season with. They didn't want to come into the season with Griffin Canning and Tyler McGill as part of the rotation, although those 2 guys pitched extremely well. They wanted to go into the season with Sean Manaea, Frankie Montas, David Peterson, Kodai Senga, Clay Holmes. Like that 5 was supposed to be the group that this team was going to ride with this year. And injuries took, Manaea and Montas down before the season even got started. Senga obviously missed a month, and we know what's happened since then with Canning and McGill and everything else. But now you're healthy. And to see Sean Manaea sitting 93, 94, picking off corners with ease, it's not like there was any signs of rust in this outing. He had complete command. He was working that crossfire delivery. Guys were very uncomfortable in the box. You can see that. You look at it through his first 3 innings of work, because I was pulling these stats during the game. He had 17 swings against his fastball, 8 whiffs, 6 foul balls. And that's what we saw last year. The fastball was just overpowering hitters. Here it was again, because you have that big build. How big is Sean Manaea? 6'5", something like that, with that crazy crossfire from the 3/4 slot. And you just can tell guys are in the box really, really uncomfortable. I mean, one of the best at-bats against Manaea was Vinny Pasquantino, and he didn't look comfortable. He was fighting. He was fouling pitches off. He finally got a hit. There was a couple hits allowed by Manaea, but ultimately none of them was really well struck. It's just guys that are able to find some real estate and get it over the infielder's head and get into the outfield. But That's the Sean Manaea that can work comfortably in the zone and not have to really fear, getting hit too hard, giving up the home run, because he just has that great command. Guys are uncomfortable in the box, especially when you see him have command of that sweeper too, which he clearly had, where he's able to flip it in there for a strike or, throw it outside of the zone and get a chase. I mean, again, this was every bit the guy that you paid the $75 million to, the guy that was, the game 2 starter in the NLCS that led you to a win over the Dodgers. He's back. And you saw it in the 6th inning, gives up a leadoff single, gets a ground out. Then he strikes out the final 2 batters of the inning and strikes out the side in the 7th. So 5 straight strikeouts in your first big league appearance of the season. 8th inning, he worked on a leadoff bunt single, got Jonathan India to pop out. Bobby Witt Jr. then struck out. Then there was that base hit by Vinny Pasquantino before a pop-up gets him out of the 8th. The Mets did rally in the 9th inning. They were trailing 2-0 all game. Ronnie Mauricio with a leadoff double. Jeff McNeil a triple that scored Mauricio. Brett Beatty grounded out, and then Jared Young came up as a pinch hitter and hit a sac fly that drove in McNeil and did at least force the Royals to bat in the bottom of the 9th. Sent Manaea back out there for a little bit more work. He gave up a 1-out single before picking up his 7th strikeout. Then the Royals speedster Tyler Tolbert got stole second base after his single and then scored on another base hit. So the Royals walk it off. But again, to me, seeing Manaea look that good, that's more important than even winning in the game. If the Mets had won that game 9-7 and Clay Holmes pitched 5 strong innings, but Manaea got rocked, I wouldn't be feeling as good as I am right now, knowing that the Mets still won that final series. They went 7-5 over the last 12 games, had a good homestand where they beat the Brewers and the Yankees, and then they hit the road. And had it not been a doubleheader against the Orioles, who knows? The Mets haven't played very well in doubleheaders this year. They won the first game in each of those series on the road. Obviously had a very disappointing doubleheader sweep at the hands of the Orioles this week. But if not for that, it would have been an 8-4 week for the Mets. And I still think they probably could have won the first game of that doubleheader had David Peterson been allowed to finish off that 8th inning. But regardless, you look at the Mets right now, and I think you have to feel pretty good about where they're at, particularly with their pitching. Getting Manaea and Senga back in this series, Brooks Raley likely coming back soon as well. So I think this team is ready to maybe take off a little bit in the second half. I want to talk about that a little bit more to close out the show. Before we get into that, I want to spend a little more time on this offense. Definitely a frustrating game against Noah Cameron. We'll talk about that a bit here in just a minute. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Have you ever decided at the last minute that you want to head to the ballpark with your friends and family and check out a game? Well, that's exactly where Game Time comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last-minute tickets. Game Time makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to first pitch, and they've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and a lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying tickets. Game Time is the official ticketing partner of Locked On MLB, making it easy to browse the app for an exciting upcoming MLB game, like the Mets playing the Reds next weekend, David Wright weekend, if you want to be there. Game Time is the place to go. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code Locked On MLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code Locked On MLB. That's LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. If you're watching on YouTube today, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. Help us get closer to our next goal of 14,000 subscribers. Now, it was another frustrating game for the Mets lineup until that 9th inning rally. They did not score. It looked like they were going to get shut out in their final game of the first half, and a lot of that was due to the rookie Noah Cameron, who was just dynamic. I mean, he had pinpoint control, and he was inducing a lot of soft contact and just was tough, a really tough lefty. You can see why the guy now has a 2.31 ERA in his big league career across 12 starts. He was just keeping the Mets off balance all game. They did threaten, but anytime when they threatened, he just was able to put the kibosh on it and just quiet things down. Really impressive in the first inning as Mark Vientos hit a triple with 1 out, bringing up Juan Soto with the chance where a fly ball scores a run. He gets Soto to weakly ground out, They intentionally walked Pete Alonso to get the left-on-left matchup of Cameron versus Nimmo, and Nimmo pops up to end that threat. Ronnie Mauricio hit a leadoff single in the second. Next three guys come up, get out, so they do nothing with it. Mark Vientos, a one-out single in the third. Soto struck out, and then you had Pete Alonso ground out. Fourth inning, pair of singles by Nimmo and Tyrone Taylor, each getting hits before Ronnie Mauricio, Luis Torrens, and Luis Angel Acuña. Well, actually, it was a strikeout of Mauricio after Nimmo's hit, and then it was strikeouts from Torrens and Acuña after Taylor. So he just had nothing going. Cameron then retired the side in the order in the fifth and the sixth. In the sixth inning, he erased a walk as Ronnie Mauricio hit into a double play ball. He got another double play ball in the seventh inning, his final two outs of the game, as he got rid of Tyrone Taylor, who got the leadoff single but was erased on the double play ball. Luis Angel Acuña got an infield single that pushed Cameron out of the game, but Acuña was then stranded as Francisco Lindor hit one hard, but Jonathan India made a nice sliding stop and got Lindor out at first. So through those first 7 or 8 innings, actually, the Mets, actually, no, I guess it was the bottom of the eighth inning that they had their, no, it was the top of the ninth, right? Top of the ninth that they had their rally. Jeez. Been a lot of games in the first half. Trying to keep my head on straight here. But what I wanted to talk about when it came to the offense in this game is you look at the bottom of the lineup. As I'm prepping this show here and I'm getting everything organized, I just happened to peek at the OPS for the bottom three hitters in the lineup as the Royals came up to bat in the seventh inning. So you had Ronnie Mauricio, who has a 695 OPS, Tyrone Taylor, 580 OPS, Luis Torrens, 585 OPS, and then you had Acuña at 560. But, I mean, that's brutal. To have three guys with a sub 600 OPS and Taylor, Torrens, and Acuña at the bottom of your lineup, it's rough. And that's what the Mets are going to have to figure out. Obviously, they went with a more defensive-minded team. You know, if they had Jeff McNeil in there, the lineup looks a lot better, whether that is in center field or at second base. If they had started Beatty, same thing. Granted, left on left, they're not playing Beatty as much. It's just something that has to be solved. And I think Mark Vientos is on his way to helping that because, you know, yes, he's got a 643 OPS, but 2 for 3, hit the ball hard each time. You know, to see what Vientos was able to do early in that game, that's encouraging. It seems like he's maybe turned a corner after that huge hit in this series, and hopefully that can spark him in the second half. I'm also very encouraged by Francisco Alvarez, who homered yet again today, went 3 for 3 with 2 doubles and a home run. Talked about him on the show that went up this morning. Just had a really great run through Syracuse. 8 home runs in his last 13 games. So Alvy comes back. That's one answer. That's going to be a huge upgrade over what Torrens is giving you offensively. If Vientos can keep on hitting and maybe solve that DH spot, and you know you still have McNeil, well, that lineup gets a lot longer. It makes a lot more sense. All of a sudden, you really might only have to figure out a couple of spots. You might have to just decide if, you know, Brett Beatty as your starting third baseman is the answer with his glove and the fact that he has pushed himself to being at least a league average at bat, if not a little bit better than that lately. And then you got Acuña as the utility speedster off the bench. You know, it's just a matter of figuring out Ronnie Mauricio, how he fits in, and figuring out where you're going to play Jeff McNeil when it matters. But this lineup is going to have to change. They're going to have to do something at the deadline, I think, to get at least one bat in there and to just make everyone fall into a better role that makes more sense, where you don't have Mauricio, Beatty, Acuña, all these guys vying for playing time. If you have 3 second basemen, you don't have one. And in this case, when you factor in Jeff McNeil, they have 4 guys filtering through that position. They need to pick a direction in the second half. But I'm encouraged by the fact that Vientos could be turning a corner, and if Alvarez can as well, that is going to make a lot of these decisions easier because you're going to have a couple boppers in the lineup that you just haven't had this season that really will take the pressure off. So if you decide, you know what, we're going to start Tyrone Taylor in center field, 585 OPS be damned, because he's a Gold Glover out there, and then that allows you to put Jeff McNeil at second base, which would significantly boost the offense at that position. All of a sudden, maybe that's your team. Maybe it's Beatty at third, McNeil at second, Tyrone Taylor in center field, and Vientos, if he's able to be an 840 OPS guy from the DH spot from this point on, different lineup all around. And okay, one guy out there that's not doing it for you offensively, that's fine. It's where you have in this current lineup today three guys that are in there because they're right-handed against a left-handed pitcher, but none of them has really hit well this season. Now, Tyrone Taylor had a good game, got a couple of hits, but when you have Tyrone Taylor, Luis Torrens, and Luis Angel Acuna at the bottom of your lineup, you're almost forfeiting an inning. And I hate to say that so bluntly about these guys, but that's just what they've been this season. So obviously that's the best game offensively. I'm still, pretty happy that the Mets were able to show any fight whatsoever and put up a two spot in that ninth inning and force the Royals to walk it off. Give Sean Manaea another extra inning of work. That didn't hurt either. But moving forward into the second half, a lot's going to have to change. I'll talk about that a little bit. I want to also set the stage for the week ahead. So we'll have that coming up here in just a second. If you're an everydayer who always tunes into the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. It's our texting service where you get updates from me anytime news breaks on the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime. Take part in our Locked On Mets sign photo giveaways. Get the live graphic sent to your phone each day so you know who's in the starting lineup without ever having to go on social media. If you want to be Locked On Mets insider, go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets, or you can find the link in our episode descriptions. Now, the Mets now go into the break. We'll see what the Phillies do. Phillies are able to beat the Padres, and right now it's 1-1, end of the seventh inning. So hopefully San Diego could pull one out here. If the Phillies lose, the Mets will hold on to that half-game lead in the division. If the Phillies win, obviously, they will have a half-game lead in the NL East. But I look at it, and these teams are basically even right now. And if you told me back on opening day that these would be the standings at this point at the All-Star break, where for one, the Braves would be 10 games under and 11 and a half games out of this division, I would have signed up for it. I mean, for that alone, if you told me the Mets were 500 and the Braves are that bad, I might have signed up for it. But I certainly would have signed up for the Mets and the Phillies being neck and neck and the Braves being behind the Marlins completely out of it. So now you look ahead. There's 65 games left in the second half when you get to the other side of this break. And the Mets finally got their starting rotation healthy. Yes, would it behoove them to maybe add a sixth starter at the deadline? Not necessarily a sixth starter, but someone who could maybe slide into their top four so that you could potentially at some point maybe slide Clay Holmes into the bullpen if you don't want to continue running him out there with the workload that he's had just to protect against that or any other injuries. Yeah, sure, it makes sense. But right now they do have a pretty strong five-man rotation that they'll be able to pick things up with in the second half. And they have two top prospects in AAA right now in Nolan McLean and Brandon Sproat, who are throwing the ball really well. For Sproat, all of a sudden, McLean's been throwing the ball well all year. That's some further depth. You look at the bullpen. Brooks Raley is going to be a big piece of this team in the second half. It doesn't look like he pitched in the games today. I think they got rained out at the end of it in Syracuse. He was going to throw back-to-backs before he got brought up. I'm sure they'll be fine figuring that out. I think he'll still be activated once we get into the second half here. So that's going to really help this bullpen. Jose Budo coming off the IL. That's going to help the bullpen. Reed Garrett had a great first half. Edwin Diaz, obviously an all-star. That's four. That's half of a bullpen. Now, Ryan Stanek has been up and down. Huascar Brazaban was great, and then he's been a little up and down lately. So, yes, there's some more things that have to be decided in that bullpen. I think that's maybe where the Mets are going to have to really focus at the deadline is getting a top-tier arm. But they're in a good spot still with that pen, getting Raley back into the fold. I think that signing is going to prove to be one of the more genius moves the Mets have made this year to pick him up off the Tommy John and also a club option on that deal. So really like that a lot. And then like we've talked about with this lineup, it's just finding the right pieces. But this is a team that is the right trade or the right few trades away from really being a threat. And you remember when you make the right moves, sometimes it can mean all the difference. And I think about the team that went to the World Series a decade ago, the 2015 New York Mets. They were nowhere near as good as this team has been up until the All-Star break. They were more of a 500 team, but they had great pitching, and they knew if they got the right piece, it might change everything. They get Yoenis Cespedes. Michael Conforto had come up before that. He was a big difference maker. They had picked up Tyler Clippard and Addison Reed, and all these different pieces that they were able to plug into the puzzle just worked seamlessly. Kelly Johnson, Juan Uribe as well. And we got a beloved Mets team. I think this team right now is a very good team. They are not yet a beloved Mets team. It's not what we watched last year with the 2024 Mets, who just had that remarkable run in June and July and got themselves into the race and were able to, end up in Game 6 of the NLCS. But I think this team has all the makings of becoming a beloved team. And it's just a matter of what they do with the rest of their season, what they do at the deadline, and how they're able to finish things off. But you can't complain about the position they're in right now. They're sitting pretty, whether it's a half a game up or a half a game back at the break, where all they got to do here is be the best team in the National League East for 2 months, 65 games. And they are more than capable of doing exactly that. So I'm excited to see what comes from the New York Mets. And what's going to come on this show is a lot of trade deadline talk. I have been prepping for the past few weeks, really, honestly, for a vacation I'm about to take. And I wanted to make sure that you guys had a real clear blueprint of what's out there at the deadline. And this is an evolving conversation that we'll continue to have over the next couple weeks until we get to the deadline. But this is going to be a good starting point for you all. So Monday, you're going to have a show breaking down all the top bats that could be moved and who fits the Mets the best. Tuesday, I'll be going through starting pitching. Wednesday, we'll be talking about closers the Mets could acquire to give Edwin Diaz a real, eighth inning guy that sets him up and you feel just as confident with him in the ninth as you do with Edwin Diaz. So we'll talk about that. And then Thursday's show is going to be a culmination of it all. I'm going to talk about prospects. I'm going to talk about which prospects should the Mets avoid trading, which prospects could move the needle that the Mets should put on the table. And then it will be finished with a segment breaking down a few mock trades on how the Mets could proceed to complete their roster. So it's going to be a lot of fun for the next couple days going through all those deadline topics. I appreciate all of you who tuned into the live stream, for those of you who are listening to the replay of this, and of course, for all of you who will continue to listen throughout the upcoming week and beyond. As always, thank you for watching. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Subscribe if you're watching on YouTube right now, of course. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen, your first watch every day. Now for your second watch, check out Locked On Sports Today, the 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube that covers everything the world of sports with our local experts from each team, league experts from each league. Find Locked On Sports Today streaming 24/7 on YouTube.